believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Ghost, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven, and sitteth on the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead. I believe in the Holy Ghost, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. Now, Pastor Ron.
Morning. That thing on? Is it?
It is.
Rain back at me. As Carol and I were sitting, and Reagan went up with Nolan to light the candles, and the kids were running around, and Carol said, "You know what? It's really neat to have a church where that's acceptable." And I just want you guys to know that. There's lots of places where I wouldn't be comfortable at all because of my theology, because of the way I do, but you folks have been, you've been willing to accept that for me, and I hope you enjoy it like I do, because the kids are so important to our church and to all of us, and so anything we can do to enhance the ministry of the church as far as the kids are concerned and as far as families are concerned, we need to do that. And so I just want you all to know that that was really neat. Her recognizing that and bringing it to me. Okay. Now I'm going to set the stage. Sermon title, No Price Too High, Luke 14:25 through 35. This is really a tough scripture, folks. It really, really is. In fact, I've tried to figure out a way to tone it down just a little bit. Not because of you folks, because of me. It is very clear, way too clear, actually, and we can't avoid it. So we've got to look at it. So listen to what it says. Luke 14:25 35. The cost of discipleship. Now, large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? He cannot then, while others are still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciples if you do not give up all your possessions." Is that really? It says it here. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. Throw it away. Let anyone who with ears to hear listen. You know what I'm talking about now, don't you? This is tough. As I go along, and then afterwards, if you'd like to have some conversation about that, we can do that. I have learned my lesson as far as dialogue and sermons are concerned, but I think with maybe some dialogue after the sermon to talk about this might be appropriate. So just keep your questions and any comments you have, and we'll try to do that afterwards. Anyway, every once in a while there's a news story that is both bizarre and tragic. Plenty of those out there. In Spain, for example, a poacher shot a stag deer that was standing on an overhanging rock above him. Unfortunately, he didn't take the time to calculate where the deer might fall. It fell directly on him and killed him instantly. Equally as bizarre and tragic was the story of a 22-year-old man who was killed when he tried to use these tarp straps, you know what I'm talking about? Bungee cords, you know, stretchy little cords, they have a hook on each end, you know what I'm talking about. He used those to bungee jump off of a 70-foot railroad trestle. You see a problem already, right? According to police, this young man taped a bunch of small tarp cords together, wrapped them one end around his 1 foot, anchored the other end of the trestle, and jumped off and hit the pavement. Why? The length of the cord that he had assembled was greater than the distance between the trestle and the ground. Surely you would have thought that he would have figured this out before he jumped. He could have measured it. Poor planning will do to you every time. For those of you who are Jeff Foxworthy fans, he has a saying, however, he says that the four most last words that you hear are, "Hey guys, watch this." Poor planning will get you every time. According to Time magazine, the American Center in Paris was forced to close after 19 months after opening its dazzling new $41 million building designed by a West Coast architect. $41 million. Why it closed? Construction costs ate up all the center's entire endowment, leaving nothing for running the literature, language, and dance classes that have made the center the preeminent showplace for American artistry in Europe. Spent all the money on the building. Didn't have any left over to run. It's a story told time and time again. Somebody just didn't look ahead. As someone said, let's all sing that wonderful old hymn about the church that spent $140,000 for a new building and didn't have enough left over to buy pews. Anybody want to guess what the most popular song in that hymn in that church was? Stand up for Jesus. I'm sorry about that. It was pretty bad, I know. Those of you who are into texting, whatever that is, I do kind of know what it is to the extent. Have you ever wished that you could take back a text after you hit the send button? I read recently there now is an app for that. Did you know that? After sending a friend an embarrassing text herself, Macy Peterson, a Washington, D.C. entrepreneur, created a mobile app that lets users take back those text messages they immediately wish they hadn't sent. So there you go. The app, which she calls On Second Thought, has two main features. A recall function that gives the user up to 60 seconds to reclaim a text before it's sent. And a curfew test setting, which holds all text messages until a designated time the next morning. So you're out late one night, don't trust the condition you're in. You might want to review your text the following morning and check to make sure your text message is something you really want to send before you do send it. The app automatically holds your text for you until the next day. Brilliant. The amazing thing to me is how few people think things through. And I'm guilty of it too. Just go out, just make a decision, and you look back and you go, what in the world was I thinking? Or about the things that really matter the most. How many people just ignore those almost entirely? Think about it. What are some things that matter most to you? Your family? Yeah. Your health? Your work? Your reputation in the community? How often do you think about those in regard to your living styles, for that matter? Think how many tragedies would be avoided if people would simply sit down for a few moments and thought things through and the consequences of their actions with regard to the things that really matter the most. We just thought them through. Think how many homes would still be intact. Think how many prison cells would be empty. Think how many lives would be spared if folks would just think first. Somehow they don't. Most of you know the name Ted Williams. Baseball, if you know anything about baseball, you've heard the name Ted Williams. Former Red Sox baseball legend, was the last major league hitter to hit the winner. Many people consider him to be the greatest hitter of all time. Williams was once asked by a reporter about his vision, which was 20/10. He said yes. He said his eyes were better than normal, and he had a lot of walks because he really understood exactly where the strike zone was. The reporter suggested that with his eyesight, Williams could get more hits if he swung at some balls just slightly out of the strike zone. Williams said, well, yes, probably could get more hits. However, he never swung at pitches outside the strike zone. Well, the reporter asked, why, if you could get more hits, don't you try to do that? Williams said, because then there is no place to draw the line. No place to draw the line. One of the most important pieces of information that we can have in our lives is knowing where to draw the line. Don't you let that bother you, girl. Not hurt me any. I can just talk louder. We love to hear that too, don't we? Where do we draw the line? We all have to do it, of course. A few years ago, 151 cadets were expelled from West Point for cheating. Did you? Some of you remember that? I do too. My oldest son, by the way, I guess one of the reasons why I remember it so much. My oldest son applied for, was going to be at West Point, and he went through all the process and everything like that, and he was in the final 10%, all that kind of stuff. But ended up there was only one out of his group, and it's just hard to get in there, even with all the things that you get done. But anyway, I read that and I thought, oh, all the things. A survey was taken among West Point cadets to determine what's the greatest single factor in the students' minds in causing this breakdown in student behavior. What caused it? Secretary of Army, in discussing the cause of the scandal, reported that at least 2/5 of the cadets, when asked what the causes were, brought up the removal of mandatory chapel at military academy. Who among us, he asked, I thought that was interesting. Who among us, he asked, would have thought that there would be this effect for removing chapel? He was surprised by it. I wasn't surprised by it, were you? The cadets felt that sanctity was driven out of the moral code, so they could do whatever they wanted to. Our relationship with God, you see, reminds us some of the lines that we must not cross, you and I. When that relationship is broken, we're vulnerable to all kinds of temptations. All of us. This brings us, of course, to the important conclusion that we can draw from Jesus' teaching. Sometime or another, we must make a decision about following Jesus. There's comes a time. Now you say, well, I don't want to make this decision or this, that. An indecision is still a decision. We must decide, you see, every one of us must decide whether we'll be spectators or gladiators in the arena of his service, is one way to put it. We must decide whether we'll be mere observers of the passing scene for movers and shakers of the kingdom. Which are we going to be? We must decide whether we'll stay among the curious or take up a cross and follow in his steps. There's no standing on the sidelines. Jesus, no standing on the sidelines. We decide. Either we're in the game or we're not. That simple. That clear. Final story. You may not be familiar with Bertolotto's name. Can you correct me on that, Dan? Bertolotto. I think that's pronounced. In his own time, he was an important sculptor. Music, you knew all about sculpting too. you look at him and you're like, what do you think? Dummy, I don't know nothing about sculpting. I just play the piano. Today he is all Bertolotto. I'm going to go with that, okay? Today he has all been forgotten, except that he had a pupil whose name you might recall. I guess what his name was? Michelangelo. Michelangelo was only 14 years old when he came to Bertolotto, and it was apparent from the very beginning that this young man was enormously gifted, and he knew it. Bertolotto knew that gifted people are often tempted to coast rather than to grow. Therefore, he was persistent in seeking to instill in young Michelangelo a desire to give himself completely to his work. One day he came into the studio and found Michelangelo playing with a piece of sculpture that was far beneath his abilities. Bertolotto grabbed a hammer, stomped across the room, and smashed the work into tiny pieces, shouting as he did, "Michelangelo, talent is cheap, dedication is costly." Dedication is costly. And I'll give you a good example of that. It cost Matthew his life by a sword in Ethiopia. It cost Mark his life at the hands of a mob in Alexandria. It cost Luke, who was hanged on an olive tree in Greece. It was cost Apostle Paul banishment to the Isle of Patmos. The once doubting Thomas paid the price of a lance. James the Greater was decapitated at Jerusalem. James the Less was thrown from the pinnacle of the temple, then clubbed to death. Bartholomew was flayed alive. Peter was crucified in Rome with his head downward. Andrew witnessed to Christ right up to the moment he met his own death on a cross. Jude was shot with an arrow. Make no mistake about it, folks. This gospel treasure was paid for in blood. It cost, you see, it cost them their lives. That's the secret of great. Talent is cheap. Dedication is costly. You and I need this message of the cross, folks, because we are tempted to believe that there is some other way, and there's not. Husbands and wives want to have lasting marriages, but they want to do it without costing them their fidelity and freedom and commitment to one another. Parents want to raise Christian children, but they don't want to pay the price of setting the kind of example necessary to help children know the Jesus way of living. Church members want a church that is vital and alive in the community, but they want someone else to bear the burden. Each of us, in our own individual pursuits, want to contribute something lasting to this world, but we want to do it from an armchair with one hand on a TV remote. Can't be done, folks. Can't be done. Jesus once compared the kingdom of God to a pearl of great price. Remember that story? What he was saying was this: it's worth the price, because no price is too great. Folks, you and I are vital words to God. He sees in you and I infinite potential. There's only one way to become what God has created us to be. It's the way of love, commitment, service. In the end, it's the way of the cross. There is no way. I'm done. We tone this down some. Pretty clear, isn't it? Do we have to start everything we've got and possession? What was waiting on now? Maybe go down here. I'll do that. There we go. That's what it said. Isn't that what it said? Is that what it means? Any comments? Can you help me out here?
Kind of makes you wonder a little bit if everything that's there can be taken a little.
That's the thing. I mean, go back. I didn't do it. I wanted to, but I didn't do it because I thought if I can do that, then I'm going to get a slant. I go back and in my theology, see all the great thinkers and the theologians and all this to say about it, and they'll give you all kinds of options, and then on the other hand is, they'll give you some outs. So I didn't do that. I just took it at face value and said, does it mean what it said here? What do you think?
Maybe it's how important you place those things. If you place them above Jesus, then it's wrong. If it's just part of you and Jesus is the most, then I would say it's probably bad.
I'm open to any suggestions, I tell you that right now. I don't believe, let's put it this way, I don't believe that, that the idea of us giving up all our possessions necessarily applies to all of us. I certainly think it does to some people. I think when we make a generalization about any of these statements there, that we're down a really narrow path that I don't think we necessarily. And I'm calming this down for my own benefit as well, but giving up everything like that is not very well. It is absolutely for some people, but it's not very well. And this whole idea of hating your brothers and sisters and your fathers and mothers and all that kind of stuff because of your commitment to the cause, I've seen this. I had a guy over there not too far from where I live, his daughter was a young lady who became a Christian, and the church that she went to was a stone's throw from her house. And anyway, and she went to become a missionary. I don't know exactly what it was. She got to become a missionary, and she was just a wonderful, brilliant young lady. And that guy came to me one day, and he was upset, and he wanted to know, what that was all about. That she would do something like that. And I told him, boy, if that was my daughter, I'd be mighty proud. He didn't want to know that at all. And it separated that family. And then the thing was that here, I don't know how many years ago it's been, like a lot of these small country churches do, it declined, and eventually the people were not there anymore. And they sold the church and the land there. He bought it. And he raised that church immediately. You can't even find the church now, even if you want. Now, was that just happenstance, or was there some feeling going on here because he was angry at what happened to his daughter was somehow connected to the church? I don't know, I think it was personally. So is it the division of the church when sometimes when you make that kind of commitment, there's going to be consequences? I guarantee it. All the friends that I know, Don, you said something about that this morning. All the friends and everything that you think we had, you just becoming Christians, take that serious, and you're going to lose a percentage, guarantee. Sometimes all the high percentage. So those are true. I mean, talking about father and mother and all that will happen. The cost of discipleship is enormous. Let me tell you this, folks. I don't think my own experience. It is worth it. Now, my friends and the choices that they made, so forth, I wouldn't trade my life for there's no way under the sun. I mean, not because I'm perfect right now, but because of my view of life and my ability to get beyond myself and loving other people, caring about other people. That's so tremendous to me, and as far as I'm concerned. And for people who don't have that, that you and I have, is that relationship, just think what they're missing. Just think what they're missing. I don't want to be late with this, but anybody, anything? Yes.
Sometimes when you open yourself up to that relationship with God, it opens up you to a whole another community of people.
That's right. Those are the good folks. I always said I'd rather be with Christian people any day, although sometimes they drive me crazy, than anybody in the world, because they may not be perfect. I guarantee they're not perfect, but they're trying to be the best they can be, and that's all anybody asks for. If you have any great insights, don't be afraid to text me. I won't get it because of a day later. You know what she said? She says a day later. Well, people who don't know what I've experienced as a pastor just, gosh, messed up. And you folks, as Christian people in a church like this, you're blessed.